Pay your employees. Pay your employees. Pay your employees.
Let's talk about Vail Resorts, because the strikes that are going on there are getting worse, and the stock is suffering as a result. So, as you may or may not know, Vail is a publicly traded company. 10 years ago, they launched a corporate strategy to take over the ski world by storm. Their strategy was to acquire as many ski resorts as possible. They've grown from 10 owned and operated resorts throughout the US to 42 across 4 countries in those 10 years. But one of those resorts, and one of their largest, is currently striking, and that's of course Park City. The strike at Park City is causing havoc across the park, leading to very long lift lines and deep customer dissatisfaction at what should be one of the busiest times of the year. It's also wreaking havoc across the ski community, and Vail is definitely losing some brand equity. And the stock is suffering as a result, as you'd imagine. The price is currently down 5% this month. Let's take a look at what's going on and see if it's a buy today. We'll start off with the facts, and then we'll go into my analysis. So make sure you stick around until the end, because I think that there are some nuggets in here that apply to all manners of business strategy and investing, not just looking at the ski space. And in case we haven't met before, hey, I'm David. I became a self-made millionaire before the age of 30, and I did it mostly on a military officer's salary. I'm now on a mission to bring intelligent investing into the mainstream. If you'd like to help us get this content out to more people, please consider subscribing. All right, let's get into it. First, what is this strike all about? The Park City Ski Patrollers Association, or PCPSPA, PCPSA, PCSPCA, PCSPCA, PCPSPA, geez, tough acronym, and Vail have been going back and forth since September on some demands. And almost all of those terms were met, but one of the sticking points seems to be around base pay. The ski patrollers are asking for a $2 wage increase from $21 an hour to $23 an hour. And Vail Resorts is countering, saying that, hey, we've increased patrollers' wages by more than 50% over the past 4 seasons. Now, before we get into actual business breakdown, I can't underscore this. Ski patrollers are badass. I'm a relatively active skier. I've been going out west 2 or 3 times a year for the last 10 years. And ski patrol has saved someone in my group before. These guys are seriously good at their jobs. To become a ski patroller, you have to already be an expert skier. You have to get medical certifications. You have to get avalanche certifications out west. You have to do on-hill training. They have to get explosives training in high avalanche areas. So, even though this is a fun job, you get to live your passion if you're a big skier, this is still a really important job, and it's dealing with people's safety. So, let's get into the money. And to do that, we're going to play a new game in a new segment that we're calling, Can the Company Afford to Pay Its People a Living Wage? First, the answer is hell yeah, they can. There are 204 ski patrollers in the PCPSA, so that extra $2 an hour means less than $1 million more per year in operating expenses. That's a no-brainer, especially when you consider that the 5% drop in stock price represents nearly $400 million wiped out in market value. Seems like Vail's being penny wise but pound foolish. However, I'm sure that the very expensive labor relations consultant that Vail has hired, they're definitely more than $23 an hour, and they definitely want to keep their paycheck. And I guarantee you that they're framing this that the company needs to stand their grounds to keep containment, so this doesn't spread to all ski patrollers across all of Vail. So, on the grounds of containment, let's see what this would actually cost. And to do that, we're going to have to make a couple assumptions. First, let's assume that there are 204 ski patrollers per resort. Now, of the 42, a lot of them are a lot smaller, so I would venture to guess that there are less than 200 on average. But Vail has been a little bit opaque in what they report in their annual reports, especially around staffing. But if we assume 204 patrollers per resort times 42 resorts, that means that they have 3,570 patrollers over all of Vail. Taking them from $21 an hour to $23 an hour would be an additional $14 million in OPEX. And they can't afford to do that when you consider that their net income is around $230 million. So why wouldn't Vail just do it? And that's where it really helps having an understanding of how businesses work. It lets you see the chessboard a little bit better. And if we dig into the actual economics of their business, I'm 99% certain that I found out exactly what management is concerned with. And that's over their margins. If we look at their operating margins over the last 10 years, you can see that it grew pretty substantially right around 2017. And 2017 was when they're in the midst of really acquiring a lot of other resorts. And they were able to boost efficiencies by sharing technology, staff, best practices, etc. And they held those margins all the way until the pandemic, when that obviously disrupted things. But since the pandemic, they've had a really hard time getting those margins back. And now for the last 2 years, they're sitting around 17%. Or if we look at the compounded annual growth rate, it's been shrinking at an average of 3.6% per year. And it really is a problem with their operating expenses. If you look at their gross profit margin, which is your profitability before operating expenses are taken out, those have actually on average gone up since the pandemic at around 0.8%, so modest growth. So I guarantee you that Vail's management is trying desperately to hang on to those operating margins. But this doesn't really make sense when you consider how expensive it is to ski nowadays. There's a funny protest sign we saw, and it really does capture the ski experience pretty well. I pack a lunch when I ski. I'm not paying $25 for a burger. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't understand the difference between operating margin and gross profit margin and some of the other various financial terms I'm throwing out here, don't worry about it. It's not really taught very much, but it is bedrock to investing. We don't have time to cover it all here, but I have released a course that shows you how to pick stocks and study businesses exactly like Warren Buffett. So in sum, yes, Vail can and should pay their employees more, but I guarantee you that the C-suite is concerned over these tightening margins. But this isn't good for their brand. Their customer base is irate. Even Wall Street is pissed off.
I'm a little angry, Courtney, and I want to be careful here because I've never used my position on this show as a bully pulpit. I'm just going to speak factually.
Now you got our attention. Okay, what do we got?
All right, you want to talk weather? I was out in Park City, Utah for the last week. We got 2 feet of new snow. That's every skier's dream. Like, let's go skiing, guys.
Good.
Except the problem is Vail Mountain, which owns Park City, didn't let any of us know that there was a ski patrol strike going on. So less than 20% of the mountain was open at the peak holiday time. All right, that meant I got a great time looking at the snow from the ski lines, which stretched on for an hour. Here's my point. Yeah, I'm a little angry at Vail Mountain, all right, and it's down 6% today, and you know why, and you can see why the stock's been lousy for quite some years. If you want to be in a travel stock, if you want to run a travel and a leisure company, you darn well better give the experience that you're advertising, because if you don't, you will get negative PR and you will get non-repeating customers. Exactly what you don't want.
I love this as
So it's not great when you have financial analysts who are getting mad. But I do want to talk more about Vail's strategy because it is really interesting. Like we said at the top, they're acquiring more resorts and then selling their season passes. And on paper, this is really good for skiers. Locals win just like they would with a normal season pass, but they also have access to travel. And ski travelers who live in New York City or somewhere where there aren't any mountains win as well because there are a lot of travel options available to them. This strategy of acquiring similar businesses is called an in-market merger. And while it can work, I think Vail is kind of screwing it up big time. Here's Buffett on in-market mergers.
The advantages of an in-market merger can be dramatic. Sometimes it just causes a bank to do what they should have done anyway. I mean, I'm not as always as convinced that the economies come about totally through scale as they are just from taking a hard look at how they run their business. There's no magic to it. You just have to stay away from doing something foolish. It's a little like investing. You know, you don't have to do anything very smart. You just have to avoid doing things that are ungodly dumb when looked at about a year later. And, you know, airlines and that sort of thing. And you know, that's the trick. It is not some great crystal ball game where you look into the future and see all these things that other people can't possibly see. I mean, what's complicated about Coca-Cola or Gillette or Wells Fargo for that matter? And that's we like businesses like banking if we've got somebody in charge of them that is going to run them right.
I really love when he talks about airlines and being a mistake. He calls himself an airholic in the past. Not relevant to this story, just fun Buffett lore. But the real point, and the point that I'm extrapolating, is that this is an unneeded self-inflicted wound. Vail needs to focus on their business, their people, and stop this in-market acquisition strategy if it's getting in the way of them delivering a great service for their customers at a fair price. This is bad business operations, full stop. And when you understand how the executives at Vail are compensated, you can begin to understand why they're so hung up on the stock price and why they're so worried about their tightening margins. The street does not like tightening margins, for the record. I read a lot of annual reports, and this one has been pretty weak on actually helping you understand pretty clearly what the compensation structure looks like. However, I did find this one chart, and if we look at how the CEO in 2023 is compensated, only 15% of the salary comes from base salary. And then annual target incentive is another 15%. And the majority of it comes from long-term equity incentive. So the CEO is tied to a rising stock price. That's good for shareholders, but you can't forsake your customers and your employees on behalf of your shareholders. That's the worst one to pick of the three. And it's the same for their other C-suite, with 55% of their equity coming from long-term incentives. I really like when the executives of my companies are tied to the long-term stock performance, but I don't want them to be completely pegged to it. When that's the case, you see exactly what's happening here. Okay, one last point before we sign off. In researching this video, I actually spoke with real employees of Vail who asked to remain anonymous. They had different views overall, but one that I thought was really interesting was a guy who works at a recently acquired mountain. He told me that before Vail came in, almost everyone on the mountain made the national minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, which is crazy. And Vail came in and immediately raised everyone to $20 an hour. Unfortunately for Vail, you don't get good press over that. But there is something to be said about that. I do think that this business model can work. I think it has the potential to be a win-win for skiers and staff and shareholders. I guess that'd be a win-win-win. But the company needs to get their shit together and get back to the basics of delighting customers over trying to eat the skiing world. Also, if you don't want big companies to eat the skiing world, make sure you support independent ski resorts. I try to make my way to one every other year. So, am I taking a position in Vail? Hell no. I don't like the unit economics of the business. I don't think the company has gotten back on the saddle after the pandemic. So, for right now, skiing for me is a great hobby, but a bad investment. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.